Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to, I guess, just my reaction of the top 25 because honestly, I saw this and there's a lot of heaping bullshit on this list that should be fixed. So let's go ahead and get started. With the top of this list, I mean, I could do nothing but agree. Georgia beat a very underrated Missouri team, and they looked really good at doing it, honestly. Forcing two interceptions at the end there. They probably could have put it away more, but you know what? It's still against the number 12 team or the former number 12 team in the country. It's a great win for Georgia. They deserve number one now. They've got to play Ole Miss next week, which, quite frankly, I think Georgia is very capable of winning that game. Then they got to go play at Tennessee. I also think they're very capable of winning that game. Michigan at number 2. The only slight change I would have here is I'd probably put Ohio State over because Michigan played Purdue. Oh, people are saying Ohio State struggled against Rutgers, but ultimately the final score was 35-16, and Rutgers are a pretty underrated team. I mean, yes, Michigan got their easy bit of Rutgers, but they also had the home field. Ohio State was on the road, and one thing is for sure right now in college football is that road games are killers. That was proven plenty of times this week. Road games are killers, and they'll continue to be that way throughout the season. And yet, Ohio State still dominates on the defensive end of things. They're doing fantastic. They should still be at number 2 at the very least, but I guess I could see why Michigan's there. Michigan's got to go on the road at Penn State, though, I think either this week or next or the week after. So we'll see then. We'll see if Michigan's for real because that's going to be a tough one. Florida State at number 4. This is, again, agreeable. I could see potentially putting Florida State up higher just because of how good their offense looks and honestly how good their defense looks. I mean, LSU, they struggled against Bama, but, one, Jane Daniels got knocked out, and 2, it was on the road at Bama. The other 2 losses for LSU consist to, of course, Florida State and to Ole Miss. Florida State has handed LSU the fattest loss so far of this season. They've handed them the most damaging and just the most impressive one. I mean, a lot of people thought LSU was going to win that game at the start of the year. Florida State kind of dominated. It was close first half, not close second half. And I feel like people forget about that. Florida State's resume is only increasing as well. I mean, they have a win against Duke, which I know that might not look that great for people, but in my eyes, that actually looks pretty well. But Florida State also has a road win at Clemson. Notre Dame just lost at Clemson. So it's and Clemson has created some major issues there at their stadium. That's an impressive win for Florida State. And I feel like the wins are just going to keep getting stronger and stronger. You know, Louisville in that championship game could potentially stir some chaos. But Wake Forest, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say Wake Forest. Florida State's got very impressive wins. I'd say 3 right now. They get to host Miami next week, who's now 6-3. They lost to NC State on the road. So I think Florida State will be able to handle Miami. And then they're on the road at Florida to end the year. Of course, they play North Alabama, but no one cares about that game. On the road at Florida to end the year. I know it's no easy game playing in that rivalry, but to be honest, Florida's not a good team this year. They just lost to Arkansas on their home turf. So yeah, Florida's not the best team this year. They also got killed by Georgia. Not very good at all. So Florida State, they have the opportunity to win out. Like I said, Louisville could potentially stir some chaos, but this team could definitely jump up to number 3. They might sit at number 4, though. Number 5, the odd one out, Washington. I don't want to say, of course, it's a Pac-12 school, but of course it's a Pac-12 school. Washington goes on the road and beats USC in a very, very big shootout, but we got to remember the givens that were handed to USC, like a blocked punt, which ended up leading to a USC touchdown, I think literally a play later. Washington's driving down the field, about to score a touchdown, go up 2 possessions, and they throw a pick in the end zone. Now, I'm not going to say Washington didn't get their givens. They did, but I feel like USC's outweighs Washington's givens, and still Washington comes out on top. But also by 10, it's not even like they kicked the last-second field goal. Both teams played great offensively. Defensively, they did not. And that seems to be true with a lot of Pac-12 teams. Right now, I can see Washington losing only one game, and that would be at Oregon State. That's the only game I could see them losing because they host Utah and they host Washington State. Utah, I'm sorry, they're not going to be able to. Not good enough. And Washington State, definitely not good enough. Look at what has happened to Washington State. Then at number 6, we got Oregon. Of course, this team sits at the top of the one-loss teams. So deserved. After all, they lost to the team that's only one spot above them and undefeated. And they should have won that game, quite frankly. They're kicking ass. I mean, they beat Washington State pretty good. Then they kill Utah on the road. And then they kill Cal, who just played USC to a 1-point game. They get to host USC. I think Oregon might literally just like rip them to pieces. At ASU, originally, I was like, oh, that looks like a good game, but this recent week, there's no way in hell ASU's doing anything there. And then they host their rival, which could be a little interesting because it is a rivalry and you never know. It's going to be there's going to be quite a few Beaver fans there. But yeah, it should be. Oregon State should be able to win out the rest of the year. They got good with home field advantage. They really should. And then if they re-meet Washington in the Pac-12 championship, it'll be 2 one-loss teams. Oregon should win there. And then they'll get into the college football playoff and honestly probably stun some people. Texas at number 7. Now the world wants to be like, oh, Texas isn't that good. They just went into overtime with Kansas State. They went into overtime with Kansas State with a backup quarterback who threw 2 interceptions. I mean, Texas performed like how they performed against Oklahoma. They also had a fumble, and they failed to convert a 4th down. They played like how they played against Oklahoma, and that one ended up making them lose. But this time, one of the worst play calls of the century of Kansas State going for it on 4th down to get the touchdown. Ends up losing it for them. I think it was 4th down. Yeah, it was 4th down. They ended up going for it. Worst call of the year. Kansas State made their mistakes. They had 2 turnovers. They also failed to convert one of their 2 4th down conversions. But ultimately, Texas led in yards by 108. Really, they had 67 yards of penalties, whereas Kansas State had 50. There's no reason it should be going into overtime. But what's even crazier, though, is Texas kind of did luck out. Kansas State just malfunctioned on the special teams. A fumbled extra point attempt to give them a 1-point lead, and then a missed field goal to tie the game up. But then, of course, they got the last-second field goal to tie it up and send it to overtime. So Kansas State could have won that game, but I'm not going to dock Texas points for not having their starting star at quarterback. Definitely not. If Quinn Ewers is in the game, I think it's completely different. But I still don't think that was the worst Kansas State team. Originally, I was a Kansas State hater, but they've bounced back. At number 8, we've got Alabama. Alabama. I don't really know. I think they probably should be swapped. Oh, well, you can't because they lost to them, yeah. All right, the placement for Alabama is good. It kind of sucks that Alabama's got this blockade of Texas in front of them because they lost to them. But, I mean, Alabama, since that loss, they've beaten Ole Miss, they've beaten Tennessee, and now they've beaten Bama. And they've looked pretty dominant in all the matches. They don't have anybody else to play the rest of the year. I mean, maybe I extremely highly doubt at Kentucky, but road games are killers. And at Auburn is always a scary one for Alabama, no matter the circumstances. And we're all very well aware of that. Auburn, they lost by 7 to Ole Miss. They got killed at LSU. They lost by 7 to Georgia. It looks to me right now that Auburn's got a pretty good home field advantage. If they can win against Arkansas, they'll beat New Mexico State after that, which would put them at 7-4, which would probably reel in quite the crowd for Auburn. But if they lose at Arkansas, it's donezo. I don't think they'll lose at Arkansas, but road games are killers, so yeah. Number 9, we've got Penn State. They move up because Oklahoma falls down. And they definitely deserve it. They lost at Ohio State, then they struggled to put away Indiana, but then they go on the road to an all-right Maryland team, and they put them away 51-15. When road games are being as scary as they are, it is so important that you win that game, and they did. And honestly, the close game against Indiana doesn't even look that bad anymore because Indiana just dominated Wisconsin in a defensive battle. So you know what? Ohio State struggling at Indiana, and then Penn State struggling with Indiana. It might be a little reasonable. Yeah, it really looks like they've played either terribly or they've played really good. They've had their bad games. Indiana, they got killed at Michigan. They got beat up by Rutgers. But then they also played Ohio State very defensively. They lost by 7 to Louisville, and they lost by 9 at Penn State. I also forgot to mention they got killed by Maryland. So it's like they're a really split team, but maybe the loss isn't that bad. Maybe they're a momentum-filled team, and they just had upset on their mind. But so you know what? Maybe Penn State's not as bad as we thought. Ole Miss at number 10. This is where the problems occur. How do we still have the audacity? How is Ole Miss, who just pulled out a win to a missed field goal by Texas A&M, they barely pulled it out of their nutsack to win this game, and Louisville has just done nothing but dominate. I mean, Louisville's done they lose at Pitt in a not a good game, a turnover fest for Louisville. They couldn't stop turning the ball over. You're never going to win a game like that. They then bounce back by shutting out Duke and then killing Virginia Tech. And then next week they got to play Virginia. They host them. Then at Miami. Then they host Kentucky. They can win out and be a one-loss team. Ole Miss, on the other hand, is struggling endlessly. They barely put away Arkansas on their home turf. They barely put away Auburn on the road. They kill Vanderbilt, but it's Vanderbilt. And then they barely put away A&M on their home turf. They've got to go play on the road at Georgia next week. I'm sorry. Ole Miss is not top 10 worthy. They're just not. I'd almost even put them under the Beavers, which I have no idea how in the world the Beavers are up at number 12. Some really highly ranked teams must have fallen or something. But Oregon State, I mean, they drop from 11 to 16 and then they go up to 12. It's like, what? All right. They pull out a 7-point win against Colorado, but they were up 23-5 in that game. Weird little wacky score. So, I mean, they just dominated defensively. I expected it to be closer than we like because Colorado's got that home field. And they've lost to ranked teams on the road. Washington State at the time was ranked. U of A's wasn't ranked at the time, but they definitely deserved it because they are now. So, yeah, I think Oregon State is still a pretty good team. I think being a 2-loss team is reasonable. And let's be real, the Washington State loss looks awful, but Washington State was a much different, much better put together team then than they are now. They've just been on a downwards crumble since that game. And I don't blame Oregon State for losing that game. I mean, they were down 35-14. Remember, they were down 35-14, and they put together a fat little comeback that came an onside kick away. So I don't necessarily think Oregon State's a bad team. They're probably one of the best 2-loss teams out there. But what pisses me off and where the list gets wacky and wild is the fact that they've got Utah. Sorry for the mic noise. Utah at number 13. I will not. I know they just killed my Sun Devils 55-3, but let's be real. They were up 34-3, and you're telling me they're going to casually put 21 points on in the fourth quarter? They didn't put that many points up all game. They put up 21 in the fourth quarter. To me, that is running up the score, and if you don't believe me, they scored a touchdown, a 20-yard run with 8 seconds left in the game. So, yeah, you tell me whether they were running the score up or not. Let's pretend like Utah didn't get killed 35-6 against Oregon. And who is their other loss? Let's pretend they didn't get shut out defensively by Oregon State, who's only one spot above them. Utah does not deserve to be up here. They're bottom tier 2-loss team. They are not going to finish a 2-loss team. And that brings me to another team that's even worse than Utah. Because Utah literally slaughtered the team that slaughtered this team. Kind of wacky to say, right? Well, it's true. Tennessee is a 2-loss team with 2 losses with a loss to at Florida, where they just got ruined. I mean, it wasn't really ever close. They were down 7-26 and then down 10-29. I mean, it wasn't close. They got killed by Florida on the road. And then they play a little bit of competition, which I guess you could say would be A&M first, at Tennessee, and they win by 7. And then they go on the road to play Alabama, and Alabama has the second half of their life running over this team. Tennessee has to play at Missouri. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I can't believe this. They have to go play at Missouri, and Tennessee is favored. Tennessee's favored over Missouri. That's ridiculous. Tennessee's favored at Missouri. Then they have to host Georgia. And then they finish off the year with Vanderbilt. Tennessee can finish off a 4-loss team so easily. And what? We're going to shoot them up 5 whole spots for beating UConn? Let's not pretend. And I mean, they barely snuck out a 6-point victory at Kentucky. Like, let's not pretend here. Let's not pretend. Tennessee does not deserve that. Oklahoma State is much more deserving than Utah and Tennessee combined. Oklahoma State has done nothing but bounce back from the year. And if you look at their schedule, you'll be like, oh, well, they lost 33-7 against South Alabama at home. They didn't have their starting quarterback, and that was a very injury-infested Oklahoma State team. And you want to know how that's true? Because then they go on the road and lose at Iowa State. And from that point on, they're undefeated. They beat Kansas State. They beat Kansas. They beat West Virginia on the road. They killed Cincinnati. And then the biggest win of all, they beat Oklahoma. They beat Oklahoma in their last rivalry. In a game they really should have dominated more. I mean, they really, really should have dominated more. Oklahoma looks like a much worse team in this game. Oklahoma had 3 turnovers, and they failed to convert 2 fourth downs, which I'm pretty sure some of those came at the end of one of those came at the very end of the game. But Oklahoma State had a pick, and they failed to convert 3 of their 4 fourth down conversions, which why are they going for that many? Who knows? If they maintain the ball better and play better, they win the game. They win the game. If they make punts or field goals, they win. I mean, they won either way, so clearly they were just a better team. They should have kicked the crap out of Oklahoma, honestly. And Oklahoma at the time was a 1-loss team fighting for the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma State knocks them off. Oklahoma State is now the second running team for the Big 12 championship, above Kansas, above Oklahoma, above Kansas State. They're one of the only 1-loss teams, and nobody has priority over them except for, I guess, Iowa State, because Iowa State has that win against them. But no, Oklahoma State's going to get placed under Utah and under Tennessee, who are out of the conversation for their championships already. They're done. And it gets even worse. Missouri drops from number 12 to number 16. Are you kidding me? They lost by 9 on the road at Georgia, who's ranked now number 1, at the time number 2. They lost by 9. That's it. When Tennessee was ranked number 1 last year, they got embarrassed at Georgia. They got embarrassed. Missouri, and they dropped what, down to like number 10, number 11 or something. Missouri loses, they tank in the rankings below teams that are not deserving of it. Missouri has performed much better than these teams. And let's be real, Missouri has lost because of their missing clutch factor. They lose at home to LSU because they threw a pick 6 with 34 seconds left to put the game away. That's how they lose that game. How did they lose against Georgia? Not 1, but 2 picks thrown at the end of the game to put it away. Those are the only 2 picks Brady Cook threw. It's the clutch factor that's been missing for Missouri, and if they can get that fixed, they win all these games. They win them all. Missouri is a very good, very underrated team. I cannot believe they're all the way down here. And then that's even better. They've got Oklahoma, who just lost to Oklahoma State and to Kansas. They've got them 2 spots below Oklahoma State and 2 spots above Kansas. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The bias is ridiculous to these big name schools. It's absolutely absurd, and it's showing. Oklahoma has obtained their 2nd loss in a row, and you think when they obtain their 2nd loss in a row, it's like, all right, time to send them down. Nope. They only drop a little bit. I mean, 7 spots speaks numbers, but really they should be down, like, honestly, below Tulane and James Madison, who overall just have better records. They should be down here with North Carolina and the 3-loss teams. And that's all I have to say. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's agreeable. We know they're a good team, but clearly not good enough to beat the other competition around them. Again, and then LSU, a 3-loss team, the most respectable 3-loss team on this list. Jaden Daniels did get hurt in that game. And so far, he has performed phenomenally in all of his games except for Florida State. But Florida State sits at undefeated and at number 4. So can you blame them? As a 3-loss team, they're a pretty good 3-loss team. I'm not going to say 18's too high for them, but I would kind of like Kansas to be up a little bit more. Maybe Tulane, although Tulane really did struggle, so it's hard to fight for them right now. But Kansas at the very minimum. I mean, Kansas dominated the Iowa State game. The final score is closer than the game really was. We all know. Yeah, so I just think LSU should at least flip-flop with Kansas and be ahead of Oklahoma. Tulane or Kansas at 19. It's completely deserving. This team has done nothing but bounce back. They take a road loss at Oklahoma State in a respectable fashion. They lose by 7 in a shootout. But then they bounce back and beat Oklahoma. And then they go on the road and have a pretty underrated win against Iowa State. They get to host Texas Tech and they get to host Kansas State. Then they're on the road at Cincinnati. They can win out and be a 2-loss team. They totally can. They totally can. For them to be under Oklahoma is kind of wild, honestly. And then next up, we got Tulane. Tulane's kind of in this weird position where they are a 1-loss team, but they're scraping by. They looked really solid at the start. Their 1 loss comes against Ole Miss. The one game they were missing their starting quarterback. They had to play the toughest opponent on their schedule. Really sucks for Tulane, but there's nothing you can do about it. Since then, they dominated. They go on the road and have an impressive win against Memphis. And then from that point on, it's slowly getting worse and worse. Right now, Memphis is 7-2 with a very close game against Missouri, 27-34, which is extremely impressive. But yeah, it's been slowly getting closer and closer for Tulane. They win on the road at Memphis by 10. Then they host North Texas and win by 7. Then they're on the road at Rice and win by 2. And then they are on the road at East Carolina, who, keep in mind, is 1-8, and they win by 3. They host Tulsa. They're on the road at FAU, and then they host UTSA. Tulsa's an easy one, but UTSA and FAU are no easy ones. They're both at the top of the conference. I mean, UTSA's 5-0 in the conference. FAU is 3-2, so they're kind of out of the conversation. But UTSA is definitely a scary one. Although UTSA's had their handful of beatdowns. They got killed by Tennessee. They lost by 3 at Houston, and then they lost to Army by 8. So, you know what? We'll just see how Tulane's season plays out, man. I'm not really sure what to think of them right now. James Madison, so I don't think this team can even – I don't even think this team can, beat in the college football playoff because this is their first year in college football. And it really sucks because they're 9-0. They take a very solid road win of 42-14 at Georgia State. Georgia State is weird. I think that was only their third loss. They lost their losses consist of a beatdown by Troy, a beatdown by Georgia Southern, and a beatdown by James Madison. That's it. That's their only 3 losses. I don't know. Georgia Southern is 6-3 as well. Troy 7-2, so they're at the top of their conference. So I think Marshall's a pretty all right, or I'm sorry, Marshall. James Madison's a pretty all right team. Closing the phone, we're done with the schedule. We're wrapping up this video because now we've got Notre Dame at 22. This is completely respectable. There are 3 lost teams, so I can't put them higher up, even though I still think this is a pretty good Notre Dame team. I think the road win at Clemson was expected. If you watch my predictions video, I literally say I kind of want to do it, but I think Notre Dame will be able to pull it out. They weren't. It was a close game, close, strong match. Notre Dame wasn't able to win in Death Valley, simply. Arizona has done nothing but win since that 2-point triple overtime loss at USC. Their third loss, everybody needs to keep this in mind. Their third loss, or I'm sorry, I guess it would technically be their first loss, is at Mississippi State. And you're like, oh, that's a bad one. First off, they went into overtime, and second off, they had the backup quarterback in for that game, who at the time was the starter, but he was just sucking absolute ball sacks in that game. If they would have had their normal quarterback in, who's playing now, who's playing like a beast now, they would have won this game handily because Mississippi State took them into overtime and won by 7. U of A had 5 turnovers. Mississippi State had 1. And that the fact that the game is still that close is kind of wild, in my opinion. That honestly shows the strength of U of A on the road in cowbell territory for the first time like forever. And they turn the ball over 5 times and they still take it to overtime. Very impressive. Their other losses consist, it's a 7-point loss against Washington at U of A. A 7-point loss. Like, whoa. All right, that's pretty impressive. And then a 2-point loss in triple overtime against USC in a game they, quite frankly, they should have won. It was just one of the worst play calls I've ever seen. I don't even know what the play call was. They, like, flip it to the side or something, and they all start rolling out. The blockers are caving in, and there's, like, not even a pass play. It's not even a trick play. He's just running, and he gets tackled. So that's U of A's 3 losses. If they would have executed better, played better, U of A would be could be a 1-loss team right now. They could. They totally could. And they'd completely fit that title. Mississippi State now, that game looks like it should have been a win for Arizona. USC looks like it should have been a win for Arizona. They really Washington was the only respectable one. This is a very underrated Wildcats team, and I feel like that's a lot coming from an ASU fan. North Carolina at 24. I guess they kind of have to default in, considering all the teams out kind of lost. So, yeah, I guess North Carolina fits in. And I'm really happy to see Liberty in the top 25. This team makes an appearance in the top 25, I feel like, for the past, 3 years. I mean, they're 9-0. They're in FBS. Why not, dude? You want to put Kansas State in the top 25 after how they performed? I mean, at least Kansas State's got some respectable wins, but this team's 9-0. They haven't lost. Their sketchiest game was, let's see, it's a 5-point win against Sam Houston in a game they were up 21-10 in, and Sam Houston scored a fairy tale touchdown in the last minutes. So, I mean, Liberty's dominated their conference. They sit at the top by a long shot. Really, they're I don't see what's stopping them from going undefeated. They play Old Dominion, then Massachusetts, and at UTEP. Old Dominion's 4-5, Massachusetts is 3-7, and UTEP's 3-7. They should win out. They should be 12-0. I don't know if they have a championship in Conference USA, but if they do, they should win that and maybe 13-0. I don't know. They'll finish off ranked. They can get a nice bowl game. They should totally be ranked in the top 25. Very deserving. I mean, they've done nothing but win. So, and that's the top 25. That's top 25. I feel like the bottom of the list is good, and then the top of the list is good. It's right when you get to number 10, through number 19. Number 10 through 19 is just utterly wrong. It's just completely and utterly wrong. I just don't understand how one has the audacity to put Louisville under Ole Miss, Utah, and Tennessee over Oklahoma State, Missouri, Oklahoma, LSU, and Kansas. I get LSU is 3 losses, but still, LSU would kick the shit out of Utah and Tennessee. No question. So, yeah, that's all. I just literally saw it, and I was like, dude, how are they so high up in the rankings? I had to make a video on it. I mean, I don't even look at the AFCA coaches poll because of how much BS it is. It's absolute bullshit. I mean, they will just slobber over teams that aren't, or they'll just slobber over the teams that aren't in the SEC and the Big Ten. I mean, that's simply it. The AFC coaches poll is just like, yeah, we love these teams. I mean, look at, like, they got Tennessee over Oregon State, even over Utah. At least Utah's losses are to ranked opponents, brother, not against Florida, who's 5-4. They got their ass kicked by ranked opponents, not by 5-4 Florida. And I mean, just like Missouri at 15 is the most respectable take they have on this. They have Oklahoma State under Oklahoma. And then, I mean, dude, like, both of these teams beat Oklahoma. They're out of their marbles. They're crazy. The one thing that is kind of wild is they don't have LSU, at least, like, up at number 16. I totally thought they would. They've actually got them under, which is kind of wild. But, yeah, that's why I don't even look at that side. It's just so terribly stupid. They're still trying to give Iowa votes to be ranked. This one is giving 6 votes to Iowa to be ranked. This one's giving 57. I mean, yeah, they don't account for the little guys. They just like the big SEC people. They think they're just the best. But anyways, that's all for this video. Like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps, and that's all for me. Adios.